Okay, this video is about my Jeep, my Grand Cherokee. It's a 2005. A very low mileage. It's still under 100,000 miles on the engine. It was like a second vehicle for an old lady for the winter time. Anyway, I would be driving along, and then all of a sudden the engine would just shut down, and it happened a couple of times. You know, it turns over, starts right up, drive down the road, and then it would just conk out. And then most of the times I could just keep cranking it and it would start up again. So anyway, at that point, you know, I'm camping out in the middle of nowhere, and I had to figure out what's wrong. So I have an OBD reader, and I recommend them. You're going to save thousands of dollars. I have with my OBD reader. They're very simple. Just on the driver's side underneath most vehicles, you're going to see a harness, and plug it into that, and then your OBD reader is going to turn on. And I won't go into all the details, but you program this for your vehicle, and it'll come up with the codes of what's going on with your vehicle. You definitely need one of these. You can pay $50 for a cheap one, or this one, Actron, is very good. I think I paid $125 for this one. And you see the code, and my code in this instance was PO335. Okay, PO335 is a code that can come up on a lot of different vehicles, and basically it's a crankshaft position sensor malfunction. So then I went on to YouTube, and luckily there were a few good videos on there, which I recommend. I only wrote one of them down. The one was titled PO335 and PO315 fixed! Exclamation point. Crankshaft position sensor wiring malfunction. CKP sensor. CKP crankshaft position sensor. Okay, it's just so anyway, that's one good video. This video I'm not gonna show you underneath the crankshaft position sensor. I believe it or not, on the Grand Cherokee there was 3 engine options, and one of them was for most of the Jeeps only have a 3.7 liter, 220 horsepower. But the Grand Cherokee Limited, you could get a 4.7, or what I have is the 5.7 Hemi in this. Develops 382 horsepower right out of the factory. But anyway, you go on the passenger side, and you're going to get to it underneath. And I'm not going to crawl under there to show you. You're going to have to go look up. You have to remove your skid plate if you have one. Over here, you can see I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and I did this whole job in 15 minutes. It's really easy. Here's my skid plate. Pulled off 3 bolts, or 4 bolts, I should say. Good sized bolts. They're 1/2-inch bolts. There's at least a 1/2-inch sockets needed. Take that off. That's quick and easy. And the sensor, there's 1 bolt holding it in place, a small little 1/4-inch drive with a 10mm socket. Just 1 bolt holds it on, the crankshaft position sensor. But like I say, you have to take that skid plate off to look up in there. And there's a wiring harness, and mine is green. Yours might be a different color, but just to show you the type of wiring harness, it's similar to this except it's green. And this tab, you can see, is red. Mine's yellow. But you have to pull this tab out first. You're reaching up in there, so you could get a screwdriver. Normally this is pushed in all the way. You push in a screwdriver, push this tab out, and then this tab here, you push down right there, and then you can pull the harness off. That's the hardest part of this job, especially if this tab is in place, squished back in. But like I say, push that out first, and then you just push this tab down. It's a double tab system to pull your wiring harness off. Okay, now I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have car ramps, I'm just camping. So a lot of campers have these type of blocks that you can pile up on top. They lock into place. Okay, you can pile them up as high as you want. You can make a car ramp if you got enough of these. What I'm doing instead, all I'm doing is I have a 2-ton jack. I always keep in my Jeep. I lift up the one side, one wheel in the front here, and just slid these two under and lowered the jack. And that got this side up. And then I did the same thing on the other wheel. I have more, and then lifted this side up. So I had that extra 4 or 5 inches when I crawl under there. And I'm just using a cheap $3 Harbor Freight, canopy here, tarp. Just so, when I go under, it's a little nicer to work. But anyway, you could do this job out in the middle of nowhere. It took me, I took the skid plate off first, but the rest of the job took me 15 minutes. Take the old sensor off and put on the new sensor. And it was only $22 with the lifetime warranty, the sensor, the crankshaft position sensor. I had a quote. I called up one garage. They wanted $175. And it's a $22 part, and it took me 15 minutes to put it in. And they want almost $200 to do that job. So anyway, anybody can do it. That's all the tools you need. Yeah, little 10mm wrench. And if you have a skid plate underneath, 1/2 inch ratchet. You want something a little heavier duty, because these bolts can be torqued down pretty tight. But there's 2 bolts to hold the front of the skid plate on, and 2 bolts back here. Real simple and easy. The other thing is, after I replace the sensor, here's something, another tip which I haven't seen anybody mention on YouTube. And I watched quite a few videos of different models with the crankshaft position sensor. Each engine's good, it's going to be in a different place. But with the Hemi, the 5.7 liter Hemi, it's right underneath the where your skid plate is, and where you drain your oil and everything underneath on the passenger side. But here's the thing. Okay, I replaced it, and it wasn't conking out, but it was running kind of rough. It was, it was just a little puttering sound, and I just didn't like it. It just didn't have the power, and it just wasn't running nice and smooth. So the trick here is, all I did was go over to the battery compartment, okay, and I use a 10mm wrench, loosen up your positive and your negative leads, and then what you're going to do is you're going to touch your main positive and negative, not your battery leads, just your cable leads. You're going to touch them together after you've taken them off the battery. Okay, and that basically is causing a short. Now my leads wouldn't reach each other. I used a wrench. After I took both leads off, I touched one to the other, the positive to the negative. And what that does is your ECM, electronic control module, which is what your crankshaft position sensor sends the signal to. Okay, there's capacitors in there, and they hold the voltage. And if you short, and that voltage on those capacitors will send false signal basically for running your engine. And that's why if you replace that crankshaft position sensor, you might get a rough kind of idle. Well, it instantly fixed the problem. After I took both cables off, shorted them together, waited about a minute or two. You really don't have to. It automatically, it'll ground out your capacitors, so they're not holding the voltage. And then just hook up your leads again to your battery. Do not misinterpret me, and do not short your terminal on the battery itself. Do not short that to that. You're removing your wiring harnesses and shorten the harnesses. Never ever put a short across the 2 leads. It'll blow up, basically. It'll generate so much heat, it'll blow acid all over everything. So anyway, that was a little trick. Because the mechanics, they'll try to, unscrupulous mechanics, they'll say, well, we got to code the ECM's got to be recoded. Now that you put the crankshaft position sensor in, and the one garage, they wanted $90 to recode it. Now there are some vehicles, when you replace that crankshaft position sensor, where your ECM does have to be reprogrammed. On my vehicle, no. All it needed was the disconnection of the battery cables and then shorten them to get all the capacitors back to normal again. But some vehicles will require you to reprogram the ECM, and they can hit you for close to $100 just for doing that reprogramming. So anyway, hopefully this trick works for you. I can't say for every vehicle if it's going to work, because I do know some vehicles have to be reprogrammed, the computer, the ECM, electronic control module. So anyway, I hope that was of some help. Like I say, you could be out in the middle of nowhere with just a 2-ton floor jack and a few basic tools, a couple of socket wrenches. These come in handy, like I say, for the campers. A lot of campers have these to level off their trailer, like when they're camping. If they're on unlevel ground, one wheel might, one side of the trailer might be up a little higher than the other, and they just put these underneath one of the other wheels to try to level off your RV. They're pretty cool. And they all, like I say, you can make them as high as you want. I've actually got quite a few of these. And like I say, when you're doing this job, you want to chalk up the back of your wheels. And this is standard RV type of chalk, wheel chalk. Put one on each wheel. And you could do both sides. So anyway, hopefully that was gave you some pointers. And this is Eagle Eric, camping out in Arizona, signing off.